Giannis Antetokounmpo just might be the best player in the NBA today, but predicting this coming into the 2013 draft would have been nearly impossible. So today I want to look back at every player that was taken ahead of him and see what they're up to now. If you guys like the content and want to see more videos like this, hit that sub button, hit that like button. Let's go for 6 likes on today's video, and let's get into this. Giannis has one of the more inspiring stories in the league today. His family were poor Nigerian immigrants in Greece. He didn't actually start playing basketball till he was 13, but due to his crazy height, opportunities quickly presented themselves. In 2011, he would play in the Greek semi-pro league, where he started to get more recognition. After turning 18, he would sign with a club in the Liga ACB, but before leaving, played one more season in Greece, where he averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds, shooting 46% from the field and 31% from 3. Obviously numbers that weren't super impressive considering the league he was playing in, but there was still a lot to get excited about when it came to him as a prospect. He had a super skinny frame, but he stood at 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan. What really had scouts interested was his point forward skill set. Bleacher Report described him as a threat to go coast to coast for a transition bucket. He has an excellent handle and uses that to get where he needs to go. He's a legit 6'9" forward who can shake and bake off the dribble. Many have been quick to point out that Antetokounmpo can play point guard at the NBA level. There is no question he was extremely raw, but the Bucks decided to take the chance on him, drafting him with the 15th pick in that 2013 draft. While predicting what would happen next, as we said was impossible, the upside was always there, and while it's easy to say in retrospect, it's kind of crazy he fell so far. You're gonna see there were some very questionable prospects that went ahead of him. Once getting to the league, it was that ball handling and such a crazy frame that had everyone excited. He even spent some time in a point forward role, but as years went on, he would have one of the craziest physical transformations we've ever seen, going from a twig to one of the most physically imposing players of all time, allowing him to dominate on both ends. He's gone on to become a 2-time MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year, an NBA champion, and Finals MVP. He's coming off a season averaging 30 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, and over a block and a steal a game. So who were these 14 prospects taken ahead of him? Now, this 2013 draft was infamously very bad going into it. I'm not sure we'll ever see a draft with such low expectations again. On draft night, truly, there was nothing separating the #1 prospect from the 10th. In fact, there wasn't even a #1 prospect. There were like 5 guys being talked about for #1, none of them being the player the Cavaliers actually took, that being Anthony Bennett. This was a shocker to say the least, but I will say there were some pretty big misconceptions about him as a prospect. Coming in, he was actually slightly intriguing. The 6'9" power forward was coming off a freshman season at UNLV, averaging 16 points and 8 rebounds, shooting 53% from the field and 38% from 3. He had a solid combination of strength and agility, but once getting to Cleveland, it became extremely clear almost immediately he was going to go down as one of the biggest busts in history. He was in terrible shape and averaged 4 points, shooting with terrible efficiency. He lasted just 1 season there before getting sent to the Timberwolves in that Kevin Love trade. There it was just as bad, and the following season, he was waived. He then had small stints with the Raptors and Nets, and since has either been in the G League or overseas. With the 2nd overall pick, the Orlando Magic did much better, not that that's really saying much, selecting Indiana shooting guard Victor Oladipo. He showed a lot of promise early on in his NBA career. He averaged 14 points as a rookie and 16, 5, and 4 by his 3rd season. But then we saw the Magic make one of the most questionable decisions we've ever seen, trading him to the Thunder for Serge Ibaka, a veteran that didn't fit their timeline and really their team. Just a year later, the Thunder would package him with Domantas Sabonis for Paul George. There, Oladipo emerged as a star, averaging 23 points on the best efficiency of his career, winning Most Improved. But since, injuries have really slowed him down. He had a rough stint in Houston before going to Miami the past 2 seasons. He had some decent games in the playoffs this year, showing signs that he might be getting back to that player we saw a few years ago. Hopefully that's the case. The 3rd overall pick by the Wizards was Georgetown small forward Otto Porter Jr. It's honestly crazy looking back at this draft. While Otto Porter was a decent prospect coming off a sophomore season where he averaged 16 points as a 42% 3-point shooter, he wasn't a crazy athlete and definitely not the type of player we usually see go inside the top 3. His first couple seasons weren't anything special, but he slowly grew into a solid 3-and-D wing, averaging 13 points, shooting 43% from 3. People were getting excited about the potential of him, Wall, and Beal together. He even landed a 4-year, $106 million extension. But with his progress stagnating, it quickly became a not-so-great contract, and just a couple years later, he'd be traded to the Chicago Bulls. He lasted a couple seasons there, had a small stint in Orlando, and then ahead of this past season, signed with the Golden State Warriors, where he provided solid minutes as a wing shooter. This offseason, he signed a 2-year, $12 million deal to join the Raptors. The 4th overall pick was in the hands of the Charlotte Bobcats, and they decided to go with Indiana center Cody Zeller. He was coming off a season averaging 17 points and 8 rebounds, but it's honestly laughable seeing how highly sought after of a prospect he was based on today's standards. A 7-foot, unathletic big that can't spread the floor or play defense. His NBA career hasn't been anything special. He played 8 seasons in Charlotte, averaging 9 and 6. This past year, he joined the Blazers, where he averaged 5 and 5. Now, while it's funny to see a player like Zeller as a top prospect, I don't really criticize Charlotte for their decision, just based on the other bigs that were going at the top of this draft, such as the next selection by the Phoenix Suns, Alex Len. Coming in, he was actually the favorite to be selected #1 overall. The 7'1" center was coming off his sophomore year at Maryland, averaging just 12 points and 8 rebounds. He struggled to have any kind of consistency in his NBA career. The few years he spent with the Suns, he was in and out of the starting lineup. Since 2017, he's been bouncing around the league, and on his career's average, just 8 points and 6 rebounds. The 6th overall pick belonged to the New Orleans Pelicans, who selected Kentucky center Nerlens Noel, but soon after, traded him to the 76ers. Now, Noel was considered by most the top prospect in this class, that without an ACL injury, would have been a lock to go #1. It still looked like there was a decent chance he would, but he ended up going here at 6. Looking back at some of these prospects, it really has me questioning what some of these scouts and front offices were thinking. That's not the case with Noel. Before the injury, he was a hyper-athletic big that dominated defensively. At Kentucky, he was averaging over 4 blocks and 2 steals a game. His NBA career has had its ups and downs. He showed enough promise early to receive an $80 million extension offer from the Dallas Mavericks in 2017 that he infamously declined in favor of a $4 million qualifying offer in order to hit free agency the following season. Sadly, his next couple contracts would be just around league minimum, as the value of a player like him started to fall apart. Now, since then, he's been able to turn things around pretty well, even earning a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Nets. Then we've got the 7th overall pick, which belonged to the Sacramento Kings. They ended up going with my favorite prospect at the time, Mclemore. There was a lot to like, which is why we saw those crazy comparisons, such as NBADraft.net comparing him to Ray Allen. While it's definitely crazy, I see what they were going for. He was a 6'5" 2 guard that was a great athlete coming off a freshman season at Kansas, where he showed off elite shooting, averaging 16 points, shooting 42% from 3. Now, Mclemore has never been able to come close to the potential most thought he had. Basically, since getting to the league, the only thing he's really brought is spot-up shooting. He's coming off a year with the Blazers, where he averaged 10 points, shooting 36% from 3. Part of me wonders if things would have been a little different if he didn't get drafted by the Kings. The 8th overall pick belonged to the Pistons, who went with Georgia shooting guard Kentavious Caldwell. A very interesting prospect at the time, coming off a year, averaging 19 points, shooting 37% from 3 on 7 attempts a game. Since getting to the NBA, I would say he's pretty much been the player we expected, nothing more, nothing less. He spent the last 9 years as a solid 3-and-D wing. He's coming off a year with the Wizards, averaging 13 points on solid efficiency. He was just recently traded to the Denver Nuggets, and I honestly believe it was one of the more underrated moves of the offseason. The 9th overall pick was in the hands of the Utah Jazz, and they ended up grabbing one, if not the biggest name in the draft, Trey Burke, who was coming off a Naismith Player of the Year season at Michigan. As a sophomore, he led them to a national title appearance, averaging 19 points and 7 assists, shooting 46% from the field and 38% from 3. If he was anything taller than just 6 feet, he would have heard his name much earlier. He got off to a really rough start in his NBA career, shooting less than 40% from the field across his first 2 seasons. Since then, he's bounced around the league. He seems to always have really impressive stretches, but never any consistency. This past year, he played with the Dallas Mavericks, where he averaged a pretty disappointing 5 points a game. With the 10th overall pick, we finally see a player still competing at the top of the game, none other than CJ McCollum. While McCollum was coming out of a small program in Lehigh, his production was just too much to ignore. He averaged 21 points in his 4-year career. That's crazy, but even crazier is what he did as a senior, averaging 24 points, shooting 50% from the field and 52% from 3. Insane. There was a decent amount of excitement for him joining Damian Lillard, excitement that didn't last too long after a not-so-notable rookie year where he averaged just 5 points. Nothing really changed after his second season, where he averaged just 7, but then out of nowhere, in his 3rd year, he would average 21 points and 4 assists, shooting 42% from 3, just running away with most improved player. Since then, he's remained a top shot creator in the league. Last year, he was traded to the Pelicans, where he played a huge role in them sneaking into the playoffs. He averaged a super efficient 24 points and 6 assists. I really think he's getting overlooked. Going into next year, I don't think the Pelicans are being talked about nearly as much as they should be. Between him, Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, Herb Jones, and Zion Williamson coming back, there's a really solid group here that can surprise a lot of people. The 11th overall pick in the draft was used by the 76ers to get Michael Carter-Williams. Carter-Williams is a really interesting prospect to look back at. He was coming off his sophomore year at Syracuse, a season in which he showed a lot as a passer and a defender, but averaged just 11 points on terrible efficiency. The big thing with him when it came to the draft was his size for the point guard position, standing at 6'6". While nowadays it seems commonplace to have that kind of size, with guys like SGA, LaMelo Ball, Lonzo Ball, Josh Giddey, and Luka Doncic. It wasn't in 2013, which got scouts a little overexcited. Now, after his rookie year, it seemed like they made the right decision. He actually took home Rookie of the Year, averaging 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. Insane box score numbers, but his efficiency struggles would end up being a sign of things to come. Midway through his second year, they would actually trade him. This was smack dab in the middle of the process. They were trading away anyone that appeared to be half decent. He ended up going to the Bucks, where in his one full season, averaged 12, 5, and 5, again, on not great efficiency. This would be the theme of his career. He's a decent playmaker, decent defender, but it's hard to keep him on the court with his lack of any offense. Since then, he's bounced around the league up until this past February, where he was waived by the Orlando Magic and is yet to receive a new contract. The 12th overall pick belonged to the Thunder. They ended up going with Pitt center Steven Adams. He quickly proved to be a super solid big in the league. I've always loved his game and never thought it got the credit it deserved. He's always been one of the best screen setters in the league. He's always been one of the best rebounders in the league, especially when you look at his box out and offensive rebound numbers. The easy ones, those were handed to Westbrook. In 2020, he was traded to the Pelicans, and ahead of this season, he was traded once again to the Grizzlies. He had a really solid year, but his lack of switchability saw his role drastically shrink during the playoffs. The 13th pick was in the hands of the Celtics, who went with Gonzaga 7-footer Kelly Olynyk coming off a junior season, averaging 18 points and 7 rebounds. He's never blown away expectations, but he's put together a pretty solid career. He's averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds, providing most of his value as a floor spacer, as he shot 36% from 3 on 3 attempts a game, something that was nowhere to be seen in his game coming out of college. Then we've got the last selection before Giannis, the 14th overall pick in the draft by the Minnesota Timberwolves, Shabazz Muhammad. I'm kind of surprised he didn't go earlier. The 6'6" wing was coming off a freshman year at UCLA, averaging 18 points, shooting 38% from 3. He actually showed a lot of promise early on in his NBA career. By his second season, he was averaging 14 points on really solid efficiency, but sadly, that would be the peak of his career. Just a couple years later, he'd be out of the league and since has been in the G League and overseas. But that's the end video, guys. You guys tell me your thoughts in the comments below. This one was pretty crazy to look back at. If you liked the content, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.